and I manage the United in Learning program for the General Counsel Office. I have had the delightful opportunity to connect with many of you over the years, but I think probably not all of you, because I've had a bunch of new folks seeking some assistance to get into this webinar. So welcome especially to those of you who've not been part of our regular monthly webinars for church treasurers series. It is terrific to be able to welcome you this way and to have you a part of our group. Erik Mathiesen is the Chief Financial Officer of the United Church of Canada for a few more days. He's about to retire, and we'll say more about that at the end. But don't panic. He wants to continue to work with us on these webinars for church treasurers, even though he's not going to be picking up the big bucks from General Counsel. So, Erik, we're glad you're here, and we're going to turn things over to you to open our meeting and to introduce our guests from Hub. And Erik, you're going to need to unmute your mic. As you do that, I will let people know that we're going to use the chat to collect comments and questions tonight. And I've been asked to turn the chat so that only the presenters and co-hosts can read it. That should take some of the extraneous chatter out of the chat. It'll give you a chance to focus directly on what's being said, and not be distracted by the chit chat that goes back and forth. But please know that we've got several spots along the way for questions. And so as we're moving through the presentation tonight, we're going to ask you to start adding your questions into the chat, and know that my job in the whole process is to read the chat and to curate the questions and to pose them to the presenters at the stopping points. So please know that, and trust that that's happening, and give me some material to work with so that when the first stopping point comes, we're actually there. Erik, I'm going to turn things over to you and invite you to get us going, if you please.
Okay, and again, apologies for the technical difficulties kicking this off. As we start, though, a brief land acknowledgement, if we could. As we begin, we have participants from coast to coast to coast. Wherever we are on the traditional territory of many First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples who've been stewards of the land since time immemorial. May we continue to learn and walk together in the spirit of truth and reconciliation as we gather today. So folks, the agenda, I'm going to cover the first few slides. The purpose of this webinar, originally this was conceived as a progress report for existing UCC Protect United participants, but we've invited the whole church because this is one of the most significant investments the church has made to try to save congregations money and to improve risk management and education related to that. This whole initiative was created for the sole purpose of benefiting congregations. There's no profit motive, and costs have been carved out at every opportunity. We'll talk a little bit about the past and a very quick overview of the kind of coverage that you should all have or know about. But this isn't a sales meeting. This isn't intended to be an education meeting. The slides that John Chippendale talks about were really just to give you a sense that it's a comprehensive plan. And then the other key goal for tonight is to let you know what to expect over the coming months and to meet the new team that has, I'm going to say finally, caught things up and is ready to serve in the way that they want to as well. So, for a bit of history, the United Church has had an affinity program for over 30 years, but that basically has meant that, we sourced an insurer and there was an application process, but everybody bought their own insurance and were more or less on their own. We didn't know a lot about it. And but over time, we added an element of self-insurance, which turned out to work pretty well and has enabled us to offer, for example, umbrella directors and officers coverage that you don't have to pay for locally, and we can make sure that every congregation has some. In July 2022, the General Counsel Executive improved this concept of implementing a captive insurance model, and they committed $3 million to capitalize this structure. But it also means taking on more risk. And this came out of time, we'll all remember, we were just coming out of COVID. Many of you had seen insurance premiums increase 50 to even 100%. And part of this initiative literally rolled back some of those increases. The part that I sometimes regret, we rushed the implementation. It was approved in July, and we put it in place for December. And we just wanted to do it for the existing participants. We didn't even want to solicit new business or anything. We basically said no to that at the time. Now, the good news is that this saved congregations about $2 million on a apples to apples basis. And those save just for 1 year. Total premiums for this program went from 10 million to 8 million. But I have to say, and you've heard me, the treasurers have heard me say this rather more often, we just were overwhelmed by the number of queries, the number of things we didn't know, certain things that didn't work as we hoped they would, our backing insurers not being able to do things the way we thought they would. And frankly, there was a lot of self-inflicted wounds in the rush. So the service has not been good. And we want to be very upfront about that. However, it has had a terrific, so far, financial benefit to congregations. And again, so far, and I have to stress that, the claims experience has also been good. We're not immune to industry trends, and this program still has all the big companies as reinsurers, and they dictate their rates and their risk tolerance. So it's taken us 18 months to dig out of a service hole and install a new team, but we're now in a position where new business quotes are timely and not always, but usually lower cost. And we have to be careful about comparing apples to apples. The UCC product, for example, includes the abuse coverage, and lots of other places you have to buy that separately. So we're finally ready to announce further savings possibilities, a new streamlined renewal process for our December 1 renewal cycle. And again, I just want to say that this program exists for the sole purpose of improving the risk management capacity of church folks and seeking to save money. So very quickly, that's what you were going to hear from me in terms before the delay. So I'm just wondering, Steve, if there are any questions so far.
I'm not hearing a lot of questions yet, Erik. Couple of details around service standards and that sort of thing, which I know you're going to address in the next pieces of the webinar. So somebody's asking how much liability is recommended for churches these days. Can an AA group meet in our church? These kinds of questions, but all of that is coming up in the agenda. And so I'll just invite folks to keep sending me your questions, but let's have some patience and hear what the Hub folks have to say before we
Sure.
we
Okay,
jump into details.
But we will make sure that we get back to those particular questions, because and I want to say that we also have updated the website with a very comprehensive FAQ that addresses a whole bunch of those kinds of things. And insurance is one of those things we all frankly hate to pay for because you don't need it until you need it. It's all about, as they say, being able to sleep at night and fulfilling your duty as trustees. And so even the concept of what is adequate insurance, as we set out in the church manual, the trustee manual, that's something that's evolving now. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to the insurance professionals that we work with at Hub. And first up is John Chippendale. So here is his slide. And John, if you can take the mic.
Can you hear me okay, Stephen?
Sorry, you can't hear me when I turned my mic off. Yes, loud and clear, John. Go ahead.
Okay, great. I want to start off to acknowledge that, as Erik said, I'm looking at some of the questions, and some of the questions have been specific follow-ups or a request for Hub to follow up with the church to deal with a specific issue, and we will do that immediately following tomorrow on that. So I want to acknowledge that. I'm the senior contact for Hub on the team. I've been working with the church for 25 years, and I am the person who's responsible, maybe somewhat for the achievements, but more ashamingly for some of the poor service. In fact, we have replaced the full team of 5 people with a new group of people that you will be seeing today and have been introduced to more recently. So the next 9 slides, I'm just going to touch on it because I said to Erik, I don't want to overindulge on the technical aspects of things, but I do want to touch upon a couple of elements on the key coverage. And as Erik said, these can be used as Cole's notes on the website. So the first slide deals with property insurance. That's the lion's share of the premium, somewhere between 70 and 80% of the premium. And the coverages are physical damage to the property, the business interruption for loss of revenue and downtime in the event of a claim, and then the extra expenses that are sometimes required to temporarily operate elsewhere while the building is either being repaired or being replaced. The deductibles range from $2,500 to $10,000, and as you go up that scheme, there's an opportunity to save in the premium up to 15%. The insurance historically for churches and for most commercial clients has been on a replacement cost basis, and if a church doesn't have a recent appraisal within the last 5 years, it goes on what's called 90% coinsurance. And one of the key advantages in our upcoming renewal is that coinsurance will only apply to very large claims of $250,000 or higher, whereas a typical insurer would do it straight from the small deductible of $2,500 if that's chosen. And that's a great advantage. When we take a look at the claims, and as I said, I've been working with it for 25 years, historically, there's a frequency issue with water damage and theft and malicious damage. And then there's a severity issue with fire, arson, or weather. Touch on wood, we haven't had some of the larger fires in the last couple of years since this new program has been set up, and that's why the performance has been good and the premiums have been quite manageable. If we go to the next slide. Now, equipment breakdown, the best way to say this is sometimes it's called boiler insurance, and that can certainly be confusing for people. But basically, one of the exclusions on the property policy is sudden and accidental breakdown to either boilers, electrical, or mechanical machines. And so there's a specific coverage for that. It's quite a small premium. It's at the same limit that the property premium is at. And it's key to point out that it doesn't cover wear and tear of that equipment. It covers breakdown. If we go to the next slide, please. Crime insurance is employee fidelity, forgery, whether it's happening on a credit card or checks or deposits, and computer fraud. And we offer limits options between $25,000 and $100,000, and it's about a 50-50 draw from what churches decide to pick between those two limits. And, you know, this area, that's why in the application they ask such questions as, do you have a safe? Do you have counter signature of checks? It's to deal with the issue of money and securities and inside and outside robbery. If we go on to the next slide, comprehensive general liability. So think of it as liability. It's the primary limit of $2 million, which everybody obtains, and it covers third-party bodily injury and property damage. And it also extends to the professional services that are provided on a faith-based business. When we take a look at claims, again, using my earlier comment of frequency and severity, there might be a frequency of slip and fall claims, or sometimes some medical expenses are required to be used in that. One of the interesting kind of claims is when an employee uses their own vehicle, but, you know, let's say taking money to the bank or something like that, or transporting people, and there's an accident and the church is sued as well. It's called non-owned automobile liability. And that is a key coverage. And so this policy acts as a foundation of $2 million of limit. And as I will get into, some people obtain umbrella coverage, which provides higher limits to that. So if we go on to the next slide. Erik made reference to abuse liability, and we find that many of the competing insurers, some of the smaller mutuals that a number of churches obtain coverage from, don't offer this kind of insurance. And it covers, you know, alleged physical or mental abuse. And it's a key coverage. And I would say that it's something that's built into our program from a cost standpoint. And when we compare the United Church to some of the other denominations, there really haven't been the severity of claims that some of the other denominations have had, but it's a key coverage. From a policy form standpoint, it covers claims that are reported during the policy period. And we moved from what's called an occurrence form basis in March 2016 to a claims made basis. And it has what's called a retroactive date, so it provides full continuity on that. This is an issue that is, I think, a key coverage in this area, and not all competing insurers are able to provide it. If we go to the next slide, the umbrella coverage, which, as I said earlier, sits on top of the primary general liability, it really follows form to what the comprehensive general liability insurance provides, with two exceptions: the sudden and accidental pollution coverage and the abuse coverage that is provided up to the $2 million limit is not provided in the umbrella limits, so that those coverages have a $2 million limit to it. And churches have an option of either purchasing 3 million or 8 million on top of the two. If we think of what kind of claims might lead to those, an active shooter on a church premises, which fortunately or unfortunately happens in the US more than it happens in Canada, or if there was a fire that injured third parties. And I'm back to that non-owned automobile as well, because I was involved in a case a number of years ago where a rented vehicle had a lot of passengers and ran into a bus, and it can lead to very large claims. So the next couple of slides, what I just finished was what a church purchases on an individual offer and accept basis. And as Erik said, there's a couple of things that have been set up over time and paid for by the national office. And there is we use the word umbrella, but not to me, there's an overriding policy for all congregations and pastoral charges for directors and officers liability. Years ago, We used to offer that on an individual basis to churches, but it was felt that if with the economies of scale, if everybody was in the pot and we wanted to protect, the volunteers and officers of churches, it is now a $10 million limit per occurrence with a $25 million annual aggregate for the whole policy. And it covers any alleged negligence, errors, or misstatements that these senior people have in their oversight responsibilities. Next slide. So cyber insurance, a bit of history. 3 years ago, we set up cyber insurance both for the corporate entities as well as all congregations through a company called CFC Underwriting. After 1 year of operations, they discontinued it for the congregations. And the main reason for that was that many of the congregations didn't have the security in place to support the insurance, whether that's multi-factor authentication, VPN, antivirus software, or training. So now what Hub sponsored and supported effective February 1st this year is a cyber incident response service, which is more proactive, that basically involves IT security and forensic experts providing immediate guidance to churches with a roadmap for understanding the incident and restoring the network. And that's a 24/7 service. And whether you're a current member of UCC Protect or a church that is not in the program, I'll use the word yet as an optimism, this is something that's available to everybody. Then in addition, for those churches that do have the security in place, they can obtain cyber liability insurance by the congregation that, in addition to responding to the incident, covers the repair of the system and the regaining access to the locked data, third-party liability for breaching private information and the related expenses. And we have probably 25 churches that purchase that cyber liability, and everybody enjoys the cyber incident response. And we all read a lot about in the paper, and it's something that I see quite often, and it is a growing problem in our world these days. So the next chart, which is the second to last, which I'm happy to point out, is so from a risk management standpoint, we say to churches, we would like that anybody who is paying to rent the premises of the church, whether it's a meeting, whether it's a reception, whether it's a concert, a wedding, a party, sport, pickleball, is if a renter is paying for it, we would like the church to ask them to get their own insurance while also naming the church as an additional insured. So if something goes wrong, the church is afforded coverage under their policy. Some of these third parties have their own insurance in place, but if they don't, we set up an online facility that they have direct access to, again, 24/7. And that helps support some of, particularly the smaller organizations that don't have their own insurance and would just need it for the particular event that is in place. So the last slide that I'm going to talk to from the technical coverage standpoint may be the most important, and that is methods to reduce the premium. I mean, we're very aware that churches, can be strapped for their funds and want options in terms of flexibility of what insurance they buy. And I've got this set up into 3 areas: the property and equipment breakdown coverage. And in green, I've reiterated what I've said already, that the premium is 70 to 85% of the premium for property. And there's 2 options under property. You can either increase the deductible on a ground up basis from 2,500 in increments up to 10,000. And that can decrease the property premium by as much as 15%. And then at renewal this year, December 1st, and it took Erik and I a couple of years to get this done to change the ways of the insurance industry, is we will be offering an alternative that if a church does not want to buy replacement cost because they would not replace the property in the event of a full claim with same kind and quality, it might be a smaller building, with what's called an agreed value, and there is a 10% premium decrease for that. Some people might think, well, if I have a $2 million church and I reduce it to $1 million because that's all I build, why don't I get a 50% reduction? But the reality is the savings is really only on the large claims, not on the routine frequency of claims that falls within both of those limits. And that's why it's a 10%. But there, from a property standpoint, can be reduced up to 25%. From a liability standpoint, somebody who's carrying an umbrella premium of $5 or $10 million can reduce that to the $2 million and save anywhere from $1,000 to $1,800, depending upon whether it was 5 or 10 million. Crime is less significant because it's really the two options between the $25,000 or $100,000 limit. That's only $130 difference. My summary coverage, though, is this is not a free lunch, meaning if you decide to take on these risks to save premium, it means that those risks are being absorbed by the church, but we fully understand that the church realizes that, and we have seen many churches move to a $10,000 deductible, and in some cases where the operations have been downsized significantly, and or the building is in disrepair, people have decided to get liability insurance only, and so on. So there's flexibility and options for that to be done. So the next slide is questions, and happy to address any questions that come from that, whether they're be through the chat or a follow-up to this meeting.
Yeah, so I have one or two. I need to warn you that during the presentation, my wife arrived with a large Timmy's. And I recommend that because there's lots of questions here. So thank you to her for providing that to me. I have 3 categories of questions, and I think the first set probably should go to Erik. But John, you might want to chip in here too. Erik, I'm getting questions about the service and complaints about the service. Not a lot. I mean, people are understanding, but if you could remind us again about the service issues that you've experienced as you've rolled this out, and the changes that you've made. And there's a couple of people who are saying, if the service is going to be this bad, I want to leave. How do I do that? So if you could kind of look at that constellation of questions first, please.
Sure. So I'm actually going to use a crude expression. We've had some internal joking on whether at a church meeting it's appropriate to use the word shit show. But the bottom line is we did rush the implementation, and on top of that, underestimated a bunch of things. Like, for example, because there were local brokers involved, we didn't necessarily know who to deal with. We didn't necessarily even have contact information for our insureds to deal more directly, which is which is the model here. I also insisted on a few things like trying to give all the congregations the premium break right from day one, even though they didn't renew 3 months later, or they renewed 3 months earlier or 6 months later. And frankly, the insurance companies aren't set up to do that. So we had all kinds of workarounds and so on, and the service was poor. If the service was continuing like this meeting would be about discontinuing the program or something else. But we've worked with Hub to fix it, and one of the goals tonight is for you to meet the new team, and the turnarounds now are where they should be, and they will be talking about service standards. If you do want to leave, this is a voluntary program. Obviously, the more in insurance, the more participants, the better. But you have a December 1 renewal, and you could approach a local broker to get quotes timed around doing that. But we're not in a sales thing here. We're here to tell you that this thing was set up to save people money. It is doing that. The service has been frustrating, but I have every confidence, finally, that we turned the corner on that. So that's my answer.
Super. Thank you, Erik. So a few questions about the captive insurance program generally, just to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page with their information. Somebody asking the very simple question, what's the difference between UCC Protect and Hub?
John may want to answer that in a more technical way, but basically, Hub has for a long time, not always, been a broker, and so they would, on behalf of whatever main insurance company we're with, they would do application review. They would be the advocate and so on. They are now still the broker, but they're more of a third-party administrator, because it is the church that is the church's captive insurance company is bearing the risk for all claims up to $2 million. And then we have reinsurance with all the big companies for anything bigger than that.
So that's a technical term, Erik, and lots of us don't know what it means. What is reinsurance? What is underwriting? You've been swimming in this water for 2 years, and the rest of it.
Sure. Okay. Well, very quickly, you fill in an application, and they don't necessarily just say yes, right? They review it to see if it fits their acceptability criteria, their pricing and so on. So that's underwriting. That's the same that banks do for loans. That's the same, it's a financial review of sorts. In terms of reinsurance, no one company, not even the biggest ones in Canada, want to bear all the risk they take on. So they basically slough it off to the back. They decide how much they want to keep, and then they spread the risk by having other companies, by paying premium. Part of our premium goes to other companies, because every company buys reinsurance to protect against the biggest claims, or if there happen to be some kind of huge frequency claim. Every insurance company has its own insurance, if you will. John, how did I do?
Good. I want to go direct at this from the standpoint, of the idea of the captive insurance company is so that you have your own insurer, and you can provide better long-term stability. And I always say to people, if you're unhappy with your broker, fire your broker. If you're unhappy with your insurer, fire your insurer. But you don't necessarily have to do it two at the same time. So if people aren't clear that, Hub has the expertise to help the church get into its own business, which it has done. I would say that Erik, throughout this process, was sitting here going, should I replace Hub? I think it might have been a little bit difficult in this earlier stage of transition, but it could have been done. And we would have supported that in any way, even though it's not what we want. So this program is not married to Hub. We have to deliver. And in the future, if we don't deliver, we would expect to be fired.
So that suggests to me that there are other options out there in the marketplace, and congregations are at liberty to go and do a cost comparison with other insurers if they want to.
Always.
Okay, I'm going to move along. I know we've got hundreds of people here, and I've got hundreds of questions, and I can't ask them all, but I hope that gives folks enough of a flavor around that. And I know that there's more detail at the website, and we'll give you the link to that at the end. So I've got a whole host of questions around the specifics of the different kinds of insurance coverages that you're offering, John. And I think I'm just going to kind of flow through the list. Bunch of them about liability coverage, how much liability coverage is recommended these days. You said 2 million, but some people are wondering whether 5 million would be better. What do you suggest?
Well, if you're doing work with some cities or regions, and they're sometimes they require a minimum of $5 million. And that's important. So the reason for sort of explaining the kind of claim circumstances is to understand that, you know, you don't want to just buy insurance but not have it protect your assets the way you want to do it. I would say that it's very prudent to consider buying a $5 million limit. However, smaller churches that aren't involved in as broad activities might sit there and say that that's unnecessary. You know, overall, we have give or take 1,000 congregations on the program, and I would say there's probably 20 that carry as high as 10 million. So sometimes it's the choice that you make, and sometimes it's required by somebody that you're doing business with.
And if I may, I give this advice to treasurers all the time. I know we have a lot of trustees and insurance people too. Don't make this decision like this kind of decision should never be made by an individual. It should at least be communicated if there's a trade-off that you're making, particularly if you're planning to reduce coverage. No church volunteer should wear that decision on their own. That should go through the board and you know, be communicated so no one gets burned as a volunteer for a well-intended decision that maybe, you know, in retrospect doesn't look as good.
I'd like to answer the question, if I can, Stephen, from a different angle.
Please do.
Because it's relevant. And the question is, how much insurance should you request or require from a contractor who's on premises? And I'll give you an example. One of the largest claims on the program, which was a $7 million claim, was a roofer with a torch doing work on the roof and torched the entire building. So at the end of the day, we say a minimum of 2 million, but the reality is if the church itself is worth more than 2 million, like in that case I just said, you should ask that third party to provide 5 million or higher. And I think that that's a prudent request, because if they don't have enough insurance and your subrogation is limited, then you're taken out of the game.
Thanks. That's a really helpful reminder. So questions about directors and officers insurance that we're offering. Few people here are in settings where they share space with, in one case, a synagogue, and in another case, another Christian congregation of a different denomination. Does the directors' officers insurance that Hub provides cover them in that setting as well, or do they need to get additional coverage?
If they're acting on behalf of the church, it covers them in any setting. If they're on a different like for instance, we require that when churches incorporate themselves, they then have to get their own D&O insurance, and we have 100 of those entities that we do. So if it's a combined board, then they need to get their own insurance. But if it's your own board agreeing to do this commingling, you're fine.
Okay, that I think it was the former that they're talking about. They've got a shared board that at least manages the property. So they
Okay.
wanted to make sure that all
Okay,
their
yes.
directors and officers are covered. And it sounds like your insurance would only cover the United Church members of that shared board.
Correct.
Thank you. A whole slew of questions about the third-party liability insurance. Um, let's back up and just remind people what third-party liability is, and how they get it, for how they get access to this offering for small groups, weddings, and birthday parties, and things like that.
Okay, so third party means it's not the church holding an event at the church. So it's somebody who's not a church member.
Yep.
And as I tried to explain, the idea of having them carry their own insurance is so that their negligence, you don't wear it, and it ends up increasing the cost of the program. In addition, you want the church to be covered under their insurance, which is why you're named as an additional insured. This facility is hosted on the UCC website and has been sent out to UCC participants so that the church is aware of it, so that they can share that information with these third parties who are having events. In some cases, they come directly to us. And I did a few of them today, because the church might direct them to us, but not have the information to share with them. But my encouragement is, as Maria will talk about at the end of the meeting, we've indexed in the UCC website so that it's easily accessible as to how that would be done. And the third party goes directly, it's an online system, goes directly to a link, completes an application, and it's quoted online.
Thanks. And Catherine has put the link into the chat so everybody in Zoom can see it. There's also a link at the Webinars for Church Treasurers page too, for anyone who's a part of that group. Question about Quebec churches not included in that third-party insurance.
Yes, with Bill 198 and the requirement of churches, of insurers to have the policy language in French, some of these specialty insurers were unable to do that. So for a period of X number of months, we had to set up a sort of a fallback solution to that has since been corrected. So the insurance company that we do it with is a third party called IRC. They're the best in the business. They work for municipalities and many large groups. It now covers Quebec in the proper way, aligned to Bill 198.
Thanks.
Sorry for the problem that happened, but we did set up so that we could work through our Ottawa office where we had a specialty insured, but that was a hassle for sure.
Perfect. Thank you. And what does this cost? What does it cost to insure a birthday party?
$25.
Yeah. Folks, you have to put in some details, but our users have reported much very positive feedback on the pricing for this and the ease of use. You do have to set up, your third party tenant would have to set up an account, but that's just the same way you do to buy something online, and they get the quote right away. So it is something that will vary, but even having alcohol at an event, which with prior third-party insurances jacked up the price dramatically. I think it was something like $63 for a 3-hour event of something like that. So check it out if you have a current third-party insurance that you're using. Just check it out. I think you'll be pretty pleasantly surprised.
Thanks. I'm conscious of the time, and so I'm going to I know there are more detailed questions in the chat, but I'd like to have some kind of general conversation about the wisdom of buying replacement insurance for your building or something less than that, and the difference it could make to the premiums and the risk that you're running. There are probably 25 questions about that in the chat, and we can't deal with each one separately, but it's a common and concerning issue for folks.
So I think John
Yeah,
can
I was
speak to
going
the
to
technical.
suggest that you start off.
Yeah, John can speak to the technical aspects of this, but this is what we're trying. We have so many churches across the country that if they were rebuilt, would almost certainly be rebuilt smaller, and that's what we're trying to address with the co-insurance, where you have less than replacement cost. 20 years ago, if anyone who knows a little bit about it was asked what is adequate insurance as defined in the trustee manual, the answer would have been replacement cost. I mean, that's typically what we would do in our own homes. That's what we have for our vehicle. That's on a personal level, that's pretty normal thinking. But our buildings, many of our buildings are larger than we might need. And that's where we've built in a couple of these options that John explained earlier. First of all, the co-insurance piece, where up to 250,000 won't be hit by a larger participation if you have a claim. That's one way that we're trying to offer some relief. And the other is the 10% premium reduction. If you reduce your amount to if you cut your amount in half, you're still going to have all the regular small claims, but you get a 10% saving. John, how did I do?
Yeah, I mean, the only distinction I'll put is between there are repair claims and there are replacement of the entire building. You want the repair claims to be on replacement cost. Otherwise, it would be like an increased deductible. But you want your total losses to be something less because you may not replace it with that. So that's the logic to it. This is the first time it's been done. And there's another angle, and I can muddy the waters, but at the end of the day, the premium that is collected is what determines the loss ratio, and the loss ratio determines the competitiveness of the rates as well. And that's why the 10% reduction marries the percentage of claims that are large claims. Because the captive insurance company, you have your own business now, and you have to charge enough to make sure you're a good going concern.
Great, thank you. Talk to us about earthquakes.
Okay, earthquake coverage is provided under the program with the exception of older buildings prior to 1960 in BC. And that is going back to Erik's comment, as a reinsurance issue. We use Intact, who's the largest insurance company in Canada. And so we have, in some cases, not been able to provide earthquake coverage to some of those churches. Otherwise, every church can get it. It has a higher deductible, which sort of is around 5% of the claim, or $100,000 minimum, versus the $2,500 to $10,000. And that ties into, and that's true for every insurance provider, it ties into the severity risk of an earthquake.
So I've got, the cyber insurance. You said that lots of congregations can't get this because they didn't have the security issues in place. If a congregation really wanted to get it, what kind of requirements would they need in order to be considered for that sort of insurance?
Yeah, the previous slide, we won't go back to it, but for the Coles Notes version, is some people will be familiar with this term, some people won't, but it's called multi-factor authentication. And basically it means when you're getting into the computer, it has a way of coming back and making sure you are who you are and you're not an intruder, and an antivirus and proper training of employees to see and recognize phishing type of exposures. So that's what is required for that. And Erik, I know that this is something that's been done for the corporate side. Maybe you want to share a little bit about the logistics of that.
Yeah, no, the national church offices have all that, but I think the key point is that when you apply for cyber insurance, you're basically warranting that you have certain things in place. So if you have a subsequent claim and you didn't have multi-factor authentication, or you didn't have up-to-date virus software, the claim wouldn't be paid anyway. So we tried to find an umbrella way of offering some coverage, and frankly, the insurance companies, the ones that are specialists in this space, said that our variability across a few thousand congregations was too great for them to come up with any kind of pricing that we'd be willing to pay for.
And I just, if I could add another comment, Stephen, one of our, I was going to say key competitors, Ecclesiastical, however, they also participate in our program. They throw in a $25,000 expense coverage. That's not worth the paper that it's written on, which is why we went with the incident response, because 98% of all cyber attacks can be solved in the front end by the right expertise in dealing with it. $25,000 sublimit, not to fix it, the amount that you're going to be incurred is multiples of that, which is why that's the route that we went. And this insurer called Cyberbox specializes in smaller businesses that don't have these kind of securities in place, but need to protect their assets.
So we have hundreds of people on the line and probably 100 questions of detail. Where do people go for to get their specific questions answered? Because if we tried to do them all here, we'd be here till midnight. Where can we direct people after this webinar is over if they have a specific question about their own specific situation? Is that on the agenda later? I think it is, but remind me.
It's dealt with later, but can you unmute and respond to that?
Hi, everyone. Yes, of course. We have the assigned inboxes that were provided, and a mass email did go out regarding the specific inboxes to be utilized for the request that you have. So if it is time sensitive, there is one that's time sensitive requests at Hub International. So we can reshare that if need be. For the questions that have been asked, it will be a bit difficult to provide an answer for all, as each case will be different, but we want to be mindful and obviously provide those answers. But I would say the first thing that we would suggest is looking at the FAQ that will be on the UCC website to see if that will address your questions. And if there's specific questions, then you can use the UCC general inbox, and then we will provide a response within a timely manner.
Thanks.
And just a cautionary note too. A, we're coming up on a long weekend. Okay. B, this has been my lived experience for the last several years delivering treasurer webinars. I get however many, sometimes it's dozens, sometimes just a few that night. And I have a little warning on all my stuff that says right after a treasurer webinar, it's going to take a little longer to get back to you. This team will make sure we get quick responses. We're determined to hold everyone accountable to the new service standard. But when we've got 300 people on the line and what Steve says is 100 questions, it'll probably be early next week.
Thanks.
And there is a long weekend in there too.
So I'm going to draw this question and answer period to a close, but simply to say everyone who is from Hub has co-host status tonight. And so you can see the chat the same way as I can. And if you have the brain cells and the time, you're welcome to respond individually to the people who've asked a question. And that might take some of the pressure off Erik on the Canada Day weekend. But if you can't do that, and that's just fine. And we will make the chat available to Erik after the event. And all
you
those
make
email addresses are also available.
the chat, you're saying make it available to Erik.
Yep.
Can we get a copy of it as well?
Absolutely, you can.
Because
Yep.
we can probably do 95% of it. But I'm hesitant to try to, at 66 years old, I'm not as good at multitasking as some of the other people are. But if I'm trying to respond to those questions now going into our database, I'm not going to be attending to this meeting effectively.
I'll tell you, I have trouble multitasking too, and that's why I'm watching the chat and not presenting. So,
so folks, we'll get you the answers for sure, and the chat text we always look at the chats and as will John's team for any themes, anything that we can improve on, and so on. But I do want to flag that the FAQs now are answers to all the questions we've had over the last 18 months.
Right. And last thing to say is that everybody who registered at ChurchX, we have an email address for you. So we can send out, we can push out follow-up information, including a link to those FAQ pages and to those email boxes and a link to the slides and all of that stuff. It'll all be available, and we'll work hard to try to make this as easy as we can for you. I think we should move on though, because I see that we've already hit the 65-minute mark, and we do need to carry on.
Well, part of that's my fault, but John, could you take the lead in introducing your team? Or Shameen first, I guess. You have to unmute.
Yeah, hi everyone. If you can actually go to the other slide, Stephen, then maybe I'll touch on my part, and then we'll focus on the introduction as we each connect with you all. So first of all, thanks for joining us, everyone. It's a pleasure meeting you all today. My name is Shameen Farman, and I'm the program leader overseeing the UCC account. A bit about myself. I've been in the industry about a little over a decade now, and my main focus has always been programs, which is why I was brought on by Hub a year ago to essentially streamline the program and address the problems we faced to date. So the bullet points that are listed here today will touch upon some of the key issues that John and Erik have already shared previously, but I wanted to touch on the specifics. So the phased-in communication was included in the attachment that was provided, as well as linked on the UCC website for anyone to reference after this meeting. As Erik has mentioned, the first year, there has been a $2 million savings delivered to date. So we all know that the service hasn't been the greatest, or as John would say, up to snuff. So that's where I come in. I was essentially hired to rebuild the team and dig deeper and understand what problems we have and how we could essentially resolve that. So one of the things that I have focused on was rebuilding the team. The individuals you'll meet on the call today, aside from myself, are new hires who have either been there for, let's say, 6 to 8 months, as well as Peter that you all will meet shortly, who will essentially focus on the new business, but I'll let him touch on that. Some of the other key points that I believe would be important to touch on would be the property cover options that we'll be providing. So Erik did touch on this, as well as John, where there would be replacement cost versus agreed value. We've confirmed appraiser relationships to reduce appraisal costs. This is important for us because as part of this program, we want to ensure that appraisals are provided because we want to ensure that everyone has adequate coverage in place. And as I've gone through this process and reviewed the accounts, that is one of the issues that we're realizing, where we may be under the impression that there's adequate coverage, but when the appraisal comes through, things look a little bit different. The change to co-insurance for when it is applicable. So if you don't have an appraisal, it would only be applied, the 90% co-insurance would only be applied to claims that are over $250,000. And again, John did touch on this, and there will be questions that we can answer later, as well as the FAQ that will provide further insight. streamlined and shorter application for new applicant enrollment. So one of the main issues that I have noticed is the application was quite lengthy. There was a lot of questions that individuals weren't sure how to address. And obviously, when we receive an incomplete application, it will cause further delays. So one of the solutions would be to not only reduce the application to ask questions, but also provide further insight that we believe would provide you with the necessary answers to be able to complete that application. And that's where Peter will come in to provide that support. Renewal terms that will equal less than most churches have paid 3 years ago. So that will be a huge savings. Again, this will be applicable to most churches, not necessarily all, because every church does have to be underwritten based on their requirements. And then lastly, the phased communication below, where timelines have been set to ensure a smooth renewal. So by September, the conceptual outline of coverage options. By October 1st, the renewal quote confirming premium variance tied to the options. And then by November 1st, it would be the church's responsibility to advise us of the selected options and specify what they would require. And by December 1st, the premium financing would be in place and the cover notes would be issued. I know that the past renewal and obviously even the past 18 months or so prior to where I had joined, these were the issues we were facing. So my main and sole focus at this time would be to provide a better experience for you all, but also ensure that the renewal is smooth, easy, and your documents are in hand beforehand and not after renewal. And with that being said, I'm very excited for what's to come, and I look forward to assisting you all with your insurance needs. And I'd like to pass it on to Peter.
Good evening, everyone. First off, I just want to start by thanking everyone for taking the time to be here with us. My name is Peter Christopoulos. As Shameen just mentioned, I did join Hub recently, about 2 weeks now, to specifically focus on the enrollment of new participants in the UCC program. So I'm going to go through exactly what we're looking for when we do get a request for a quote. The first and probably one of the most important is a completed application. Now, obviously, the application is for new UCC participants. It must be done in order for a quote to be provided. Now, in order to reduce and simplify the process, we have created a new application, which will be utilized going forward. Now, why an application is necessary is for the enrollment is it allows us to assess the risk and ensure adequate insurance coverage is in place. If you have any questions pertaining to the application or need any help filling it out, that's what I'm here for. I'm just a phone call away. So do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions pertaining to the application, or even if you do need any help filling it out. Now, the second thing that we will need is your current insurance summary. Now, this is really important because the current insurance summary will provide the necessary insight, such as coverage and associated limits currently in place, which will allow us to provide you with a quote based on your church and its requirements. The next thing that we would need is the most recent property appraisal, if there is one. An appraisal is necessary to ensure the adequate coverage is in place again. In the event that your church does not have an appraisal within the last 5 years, as John did mention before, a 90% coinsurance clause will apply to claims over $250,000. Appraisals will ensure that the adequate coverage is in place. For example, your building coverage may be too low with your current policy in the event of a total loss. And another important point, just an example, would be if the building is insured for a limit of $1 million, but in reality is actually worth $2 million. In the event of the total loss, the church would be responsible for incurring the rest of those costs. Now, the last thing that we would need, and I'm just going to touch on very quickly, is just any details of any claims that have occurred within the last 3 years. So thank you very much. Just wanted to introduce myself. And again, any questions pertaining to the application, I'll be providing my contact information. Do not hesitate to reach out. Thank you.
Over to you, Catherine.
Hi, everyone. My name's Catherine Vidanov, and I'm here to talk to you today about your hub coordination contacts. So you've had the pleasure of already meeting John Chippendale, Shameen Farman, and Peter Christopoulos. So John Chippendale is our senior contact, and as he mentioned earlier, he's worked with the UCC program for over 20 years. Shameen Farman, coming in within the last year, is our new program team lead. She's here to answer any immediate questions, or if there happen to be any things that are required to be escalated to be responded to in a more immediate fashion or in more in-depth fashion. She would be your go-to. Then you have me, your operations manager. So basically, our goal is right now to streamline the process, ensure that all of your questions are answered within a timely manner, and sending off any of emails that may come into, I guess, our UCC generic inbox to the correct bodies. We have Peter Christopoulos, who is one of our new team members. We're so glad to have you, Peter. He's basically here now to enroll any of our new participants, which will then help keep the focus in regards to day-to-days to myself, as well as Shameen. Then we have Shubham Abnesia, who is our intern currently, who assists with urgent document issuance. So I know some of you on the call have recognized a few names. So you guys may have sent out requests for COIs, and we've been able to send them within the first 24 hours. Next, we have Denise Ruddy, who is our technology platform management, and Adelaide Marcotte, who is our claim advocacy. So if anytime there's a claim, you would be working with Adelaide, and she's someone that has been with the UCC program for quite some time. I would like to just quickly touch base on the fact that we are here to improve the service standards back to the churches and ensure that the main goal is met, that every single one of us here in the call with you today at Hub International provide you with the revamped UCC Protect service that you do deserve. Thank you.
I think it's Maria now.
Hi, folks. I just wanted to say hello. There's a lot of familiar faces here today, and just wanted to say hello, and glad to see so many of you were able to attend today. What I'm sharing is very, very short and sweet. I just wanted to let you know that all of the information that the team has provided is on our website. The UCC Protect page is available and is being updated regularly with, as we had mentioned earlier, with new applications, new downloads. Our policy wording is on the platform as well. So any questions that you may have, even connected to the frequently asked questions, are there and available for you whenever you need that information. And of course, I'm always available. Many of you have been back and forth with me as well. I'm always happy to lend a hand and redirect you when you have a question, or be able to provide you the information that you're looking for. So, yeah. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm getting questions about where's the website. Have we got a website address on these slides, or should we be sending it out by email afterwards?
Folks, it's I mean, we can certainly put the link in the chat right now, but if you just even Google United Church UCC Protect, we're starting to recommend Google as opposed to always providing the links, but there it is.
Thank you. And I'm just going to cut and paste that over into the chat at YouTube as well, because we've got a bunch of folks there who are also needing it. So the set of questions that I missed in the flurry of questions were about appraisals, and you've mentioned them a few times. Tell us about appraisals, how to get one, how often do we need them, do you have recommended appraisers? What happens if we don't have one? Kind of unpack that whole constellation of issues for us. Could you please?
Okay, and again, I'll go first, and John or others may want to jump in. But a couple of things. Right now, we have a special deal with a small appraisal company that works across the country. Scott Cruikshank at Loss Control Consultants. They're based in Alberta, but he also has a place in Port Dover, and in any case, he's all over the country, and offers rates that are much better than some of the biggies. We treasurers will know we've been listing the top 5 or 6 companies that are available, but a couple of things are happening. If your request is not time sensitive, we're going to try to set up a deal with each regional council next year, where he'll actually come and we'll ask people who want appraisals to sign on, and he'll potentially just do literally dozens of them at a time. He does this for municipalities and schools and various entities all the time. So
sounds perfect, Eric. How do we reach him?
Well, 2 things. I'm going to go through the regional council to see if we want to do a sign up type thing. Approaching him directly, it is something that I offer to people when they ask. It's Loss Control Consultants. I think it's lcc.ca. But we are going to try to offer it in sort of a batch basis to make it efficient for him as well. There are also many local, many firms and that we could again put in the chat. And in fact, I think we're going to send a follow-up note to attendees tonight with a few bits of these information. These are things that say our treasurer audience would have seen every month, but we do have a lot of new faces. So I think we'll follow up with a few pieces, including this one. It'll include the web link. It'll include information on appraisals and so on. Lots of us, my own church hasn't had an appraisal in 15 years. And we're just at the stage now where we're saying, that's on us. So again, this program is going to try to drive down or reduce the cost. But it's still a local decision on whether to get one. But it is the only way to keep your replacement value, if that's what you're aiming for. It's the way to keep it current. And John has some ideas around getting one appraisal and then having an automated way to update it using inflation factors. And again, we're looking for ways to make it efficient for all concerned. John, do you want to jump in?
Yes, yeah. So because at the end of the day, if you do an appraisal and then the church doesn't do any renovations or new things, then we update it each year with an inflation factor that's applied by the insurance industry. But in addition, the appraisal company that did the appraisal 5 years ago, 10 years ago, can update that appraisal based upon their contribution with special things that might involve heritage buildings, it might involve stained glass or organs that are unique and specific to be dealt with within the context of an overall inflation factor for the insurance industry. So it's not about having to pay for an appraisal every 5 years. It's about doing it with an appraisal company that is used as a foundation.
Perfect, thanks. I should tell folks online that we are approaching the end of our program. It's we've been going at this now for 80 minutes, and I'm kind of hoping we can be finished in another 10 at most. So if there are questions of general interest, not specific to your congregation only, but that might be interesting to 10 other congregations as well, and we haven't touched on them yet, put them in the chat now, and I'll watch the flurry that comes in. And while you're doing that, question, where do people see the actual policy? You've talked a lot and we've seen summaries and so on, but if you're interested in getting into the fine print, where do they find it?
It would be on the UCC website as well. Maybe Maria, can you just share a link that would go directly to the wording so that it's easily accessible?
Yep, happy to do that. I'm just
Thank
pulling
you.
that up right now.
Yeah, and frankly, it's an attachment file on the main page that we've already shared. So there's a certificate, which is the 6-pager summary, or 6 or 8, whatever it is, that you would get. The full policy wording is also on the church website, and Maria's just provided. I think that will probably be the full policy wording. There's also the insurance certificate that you get. But
yes.
all of this we're looking to provide.
And so ballpark, what does it cost to get an appraisal? Ballpark.
It depends on the size of your building. Smaller buildings might be $1,500 type range, but it can go as high as 4 or 5 if you've got a large building.
Thank you. Hang on, the thing's jumping around here. The agreed value in the property, is that something that is just for a specific time period, or does that live with you until you change it?
That lives with you until you change it. And the best benchmark would be, it's cut in half, and you get your 10% reduction. But at the end of the day, if somebody felt, oh my God, I actually would do something, but even if you cut it less than in half, because let's say you're a $4 million church and you would only do $1 million, it's still going to be the 10% reduction in premium, because as I said earlier, it reflects the percentage of claimed costs that are the large losses. So in the September conceptual outline that Shameen referenced, where we'll explain that, and the benchmark that we will use for people is to cut your premium in half. But if you specifically want to do it to 75% or some specific number, that option is there for you.
John, just to correct, you did say cut your premium in half, and everyone was really happy to hear that. That is not what he meant.
Sorry.
Yeah, cut the insured value in half is what he meant to say.
I think that makes a little more sense to me.
Yeah, foot and mouth disease. Sorry.
There we go. You need some more of that coffee. Let me hand you my Timmy's.
I've got cranberry and soda.
Oh, there we go. So third-party liability. A couple of people have been asking, what about groups that don't pay rent? Knitters Guild or AA or Alzheimer's Society or something. Do they need third-party liability too, if they're not part of the church?
The church can agree to absorb any activity. So at the end of the day, if people aren't charging because you don't feel it's worth charging, and then it's covered and there's no requirement for this. As I tried to say, this is a risk management effort to protect the program and the costs. It is not a requirement of insurance. For instance, let's say somebody came on the premises and somebody forgot to ask for evidence of insurance. It's not like it's going to be excluded under the policy. This is a best practices approach.
Sure.
And folks, if I may, this notion of being covered, these third parties aren't covered in the direct sense of their, being named. That nobody even knows they exist unless there is a policy. If something happens, they would sue the church, and it's a matter of which insurance policy would respond. The church's policy will always respond, but best practice is for those third parties to have their own insurance that pays first, so that our premiums don't go up.
And, in my congregation, we have a number of national groups like Narcotics Anonymous that rent space once a week. And all of those groups already have blanket coverage for all their groups. So you may want simply to require that in your rental contract with them.
Yeah.
Folks, just to say, something like a knitting circle or something, there's also a risk judgment and a local hassle judgment and all those kinds of things. There are groups that are riskier than others. But John said at the beginning, if someone is paying to use your facility, best practice is to require them to have insurance. If someone you could consider certain of these other things part of your community outreach,
Yeah.
and accept that you're taking the risk onto your policy.
So I've got a technical legal question. If somebody in the decision-making process decides that you're going to go for less than full replacement value for your property coverage, what does full disclosure to all stakeholders look like?
Oh, I'm sure lots of people would answer that differently. I would say the way I answer it is a treasurer or a single trustee, or even the board of trustees, the entire church board should know at a minimum. It's not like you necessarily showed it. You could even put it in your annual report saying, to contain insurance costs, we've taken certain actions. But at a minimum, I tell treasurers all the time to not wear anything themselves. Okay. If there's a trade-off decision being made, make the whole board own it with you.
And so how would you respond to church trustees who don't want to insure the property because it's expensive?
Again, as John described, there's first of all, it's non-negotiable, in my opinion, to have liability coverage. If they don't want to insure the church property and therefore take on the risk that certain repairs, something can't be fixed or won't be fixed, there's even a possibility of just insuring for wreckage value, which is to say, we're not going to fix anything, but if there's a total loss, we'll at least clean up the site. There are choices you can make on property insurance. On liability insurance, that in this day and age, that's a non-starter.
Yeah, and the only comment I'd make, Stephen, is getting to Erik's point. And we had a circumstance like this where the insurer went in to do an inspection and found out that there were many issues. It's not just a property insurance policy. If the premises is not safe, then it will be a liability issue. So at the end of the day, it's one thing to not insure your property because you can't afford to. It's another thing to not insure your property because it's falling apart and unsafe. Those situations won't be able to get insurance.
That really helps, and thank you. So last question I'm going to pose tonight. Oh, my screen's freezing. I hope you can hear me. Couple of congregations online made an application last year, and then for one reason or another didn't end up moving on it, and now they're rethinking and wanting to join up. Are they going to have to go through the whole application procedure again, or can they simply update what they did before and ask for a quote?
I can touch on this. If you already have the application and you've completed it, we will require for the values to be reviewed and the coverages to ensure that it is up to date and reflective of your requirements at this time. And then we would suggest that you sign it as of today's date or the date that you send it over to us so that it is updated. So it's not necessary to send in a new application, but at times it may be best to just start fresh if all the values and the coverages that you had previously are no longer reflective of your current situation.
And I'm going to jump in here and say, and when is the short form application going to be available? Because it might be very tempting to do that too.
Yes, so the application, I've actually put it together, Erik, today, it was finished today, but we just want to do one final review internally with your sign off to ensure that there's nothing missed, and then we can go ahead and have it go live. But the application is done.
Right. So Shameen, I would answer the question slightly different, but
sure.
but similarly, I would say you don't need to do your application right away, but you do need to send us your updated summary, and the summary we will rely on the values that the insurer has put on, and then when and if our quote is cheaper, then we'll probably come back to you and say, hey, can you please sign the statement of values? So like I did one just today. So the updated summary of insurance is key because as Peter mentioned, that's the basis of which we provide our quote on. And there's a number of people on that. Just so you know, we have a running list. Some people on this call had mentioned that they had provided information and we did not respond previously. Part of that answer is the service issue, and part of the answer is the run before the walk that Erik talked about. But we have kept all that information, and we in fact are following up with those churches in a more proactive way, given that we just hired Peter to do that on a full-time basis.
So we have hit the bottom of the hour at the 90-minute mark, and I think it's time to draw this to a close. I wanted to offer first John and then Erik an opportunity to say some final words.
Yeah, the only thing I want to say in a very genuine way is the service issue, and that's why I answered the question so directly. We don't take it for granted that we are the broker and partner and advisor to Hub. And we know that we have been on thin ice. We've also invested in a new technology that streamlines it. And our job is to continue to earn your respect and support. So I just want to be honest about that.
Thank you. Erik.
And I guess my comment is the one thing that treasurers were begging for was delivered from day one, which is the savings. I lay awake a lot of nights wondering if I had it to do over again, would I do it differently? Would I delay? And I'm not, those are pretty significant savings, and monies are really tight in most churches. So, you are hearing a commitment tonight and meeting a team that I have gained much confidence in. And the more United Churches that participate, the greater the spreading of risk and the greater our the likelihood of premium stability. But the main point I would make is the General Council, which is our highest authority, approved this big investment because it was identified as something that it could make an impact for congregations. A lot of our stuff, you read our long memos and everything else, but this is one that has delivered to a bottom line. And when we get the service right as well, then I'm knocking on wood as we speak. If we get normal claims experience, this will be a way to improve risk management for all United Church ministries, and that's what we're working to. And I guess I just want to say thank you to everybody too. It's I've got a couple of days to go before retirement, but I will be continuing to be involved with the Treasurer Series, and I will be continuing to monitor this particular file because I wanted to have this launch 2.0 a year ago, and so we're late, but hopefully you'll feel it was worth it some years from now.
Thank you, Erik, and thank you all of you. So before we leave, Erik stole a little bit of my thunder, but I did want to pause and acknowledge Erik's retirement. Erik is stepping down from the role of Chief Financial Officer for the General Council after 15 years working in the General Counsel's office. And what a privilege and a delight it has been to work with him. He and I started working together at the beginning of the pandemic when he jumped in to offer these webinars monthly for treasurers. And it has been a salvation for many of us in pastoral ministry. I have opened up the chat again, so if you want to chat to everybody, and in particular, if you want to add your thanks to Erik for his ministry, I would call it a ministry, you're welcome to do that. We will collect all of these chat comments and run them by all the presenters. We will send out a note to you tomorrow with some further resources and a new link to the recording and all of that kind of stuff. And we will stay in touch. But it's time now to draw this to a close. I'm going to take the presenters off into a breakout room where they can debrief with each other. I will wish the rest of you a wonderful, relaxing summer, and I look forward to seeing any of you who want to join us next September. The webinars for church treasurers might even get rebranded because we don't want to exclude the trustees and other folks who are on the line tonight. There is information here tonight that I think can help each of our congregations, and it is it's important to me to know that you are welcome. So thank you. A blessed summer, and we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good
Take
night.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.